The grand arena floated in the darkness of space like a massive jewel. Hundreds of alien ships surrounded it, each one carrying spectators from different worlds across the galaxy. Inside the arena, thousands of beings from dozens of species filled the seats. They had all come to watch the tournament. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood in the preparation room, checking his equipment one last time. He was 28 years old with dark hair and calm gray eyes. His hands were steady as he tightened the straps on his protective gear. He had trained for months to reach this moment. Commander Vera Hughes stood beside him. She was his mentor and training officer. Her short blonde hair was streaked with gray, and her green eyes watched Jake carefully. She had seen many warriors in her 42 years, but Jake was different. He did not rely on strength or anger. He thought before he acted. "Remember what I taught you?" Vera said quietly. "They will expect you to fight like them. Do not give them what they expect." Jake nodded. He understood. The other species in the coalition saw humans as weak. Earth had joined the galactic community only 5 years ago. Most aliens thought humans were soft creatures from a gentle world. They did not know the truth about Earth. They did not know what humans had survived to reach the stars. The announcement system crackled to life. Jake's name was called. It was time for his first match. Vera squeezed his shoulder once, then stepped back. Jake walked through the tunnel toward the arena floor. The roar of the crowd grew louder with each step. When Jake emerged into the light, laughter rippled through the alien spectators. He was small compared to most warriors. His body had no natural armor, no claws, no venomous fangs. He looked like easy prey. The betting screen showed the odds against him. Nobody expected him to win. His opponent entered from the opposite side. It was a Vortan warrior, tall and covered in scales that shimmered like metal. The Vortan had claws on each finger that dripped with natural poison. Its species was known for speed and killing strikes. The crowd cheered for the Vortan. They wanted to see the human learn his place. The referee, a floating sphere with multiple sensors, signaled the start of the match. The Vortan moved instantly, crossing the distance between them in a blur. Jake barely dodged the first strike. The claws passed inches from his face. He could smell the poison on them. The Vortan attacked again and again. Each strike was faster than the last. Jake dodged and blocked, but he could not keep up forever. A claw caught his shoulder, tearing through his protective gear. Blood ran down his arm. The crowd roared with approval, but Jake did not panic. He watched his opponent carefully. He noticed patterns. The Vortan always struck from the right after a left feint. It always stepped the same way before lunging. These patterns were trained into the warrior through years of practice. They made the Vortan fast and deadly, but also predictable. Jake let himself get backed into a corner. The Vortan sensed victory and rushed forward for a killing blow. But this time Jake was ready. He had learned the pattern. When the Vortan struck, Jake was not where it expected him to be. He moved inside the warrior's guard and struck at a vulnerable joint where the scales did not protect. The Vortan went down hard. Jake followed with 2 more precise strikes to disable his opponent without causing permanent injury. The referee declared the match over. Jake had won. The arena fell silent. Nobody had expected this outcome. Vera watched from the observation deck with a slight smile. She had known Jake could do it. He had learned to fight on Earth, where survival meant using your brain more than your muscles. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about underestimating humans. Over the next 3 days, Jake fought 6 more matches. Each opponent was stronger and more dangerous than the last. He faced a Dralian berserker who felt no pain and kept fighting even with broken bones. He defeated a Zenith hunter who could see perfectly in complete darkness. He survived against a Kelvar warrior, whose species had been fighting wars for 10,000 years. After each victory, the alien crowds grew quieter. They began to understand that this human was not just lucky, he adapted to every fighting style. He learned from every exchange. When he took damage, he adjusted his strategy and kept fighting. There was something disturbing about his persistence. Between matches, warriors from other species talked among themselves. They shared information about Earth that they had dismissed before. Earth was a death world, they realized. The gravity was higher than most inhabited planets. The weather systems were violent and unpredictable. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, disease and predators everywhere. Yet humans had survived and thrived. The whispers spread through the station. Humans were persistence hunters, some said. On Earth, they chased their prey for days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies were built to endure, not to sprint. They healed from injuries that would kill other species. They kept going when any sane creature would give up. Jake advanced to the championship match. His opponent was Threx, the reigning champion from the Kravik species. Threx had won the tournament for 3 years running. He stood 8 feet tall with scales harder than most armor. His muscles could crush steel. He had never been defeated in the arena. The night before the final match, Vera found Jake on the observation deck. He was looking out at the stars, his expression thoughtful. His body was covered in bruises and healing cuts from previous fights. His right hand was wrapped in medical tape. "You do not have to fight him," Vera said gently. "You have already proven what humans can do. Nobody will think less of you if you withdraw." Jake shook his head. "Threx is strong, but strength is not everything. I have watched recordings of his fights. He wins through power and intimidation. He has never faced an opponent who refused to be intimidated." "He could kill you," Vera said bluntly. "The Kravik do not hold back. He will not care that you are a fellow coalition member." "I know," Jake replied, "but I also know something he does not know. I know that humans do not quit, ever. That gives me an advantage." Vera studied him for a long moment, then nodded. She recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same look she had seen in the mirror during her own service in dangerous situations. It was determination that went beyond reason. It was the human refusal to accept defeat. The next day, the arena was more crowded than ever before. Species from across the galaxy had come to watch the final match. The betting pools showed massive odds in favor of Threx. A few optimistic humans had bet on Jake, but everyone else expected a quick and brutal defeat for the human challenger. Jake walked onto the arena floor to mixed reactions. Some spectators cheered for him, impressed by his previous victories. Most remained silent, waiting to see how quickly the Kravik would end this foolish challenge. Jake took his position and waited calmly. Threx entered from the opposite side, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The Kravik champion was massive, towering over every other being in the arena. His scaled hide was dark green and scarred from countless battles. His eyes were yellow and cold. He looked at Jake the way a predator looks at prey. The two warriors stood facing each other in the center of the arena. Threx smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Jake's expression did not change. He simply waited, watching and ready. The referee floated between them, sensors scanning both fighters. Satisfied that both were ready, the referee backed away. The signal sounded. The championship match had begun. Threx moved first, faster than something so large should be able to move. His massive fist came at Jake like a missile. Jake threw himself to the side, but the wind from the missed punch knocked him off his feet. He rolled and came up in time to see Threx's foot sweeping toward him. The kick caught Jake in the ribs and sent him flying across the arena floor. He hit the ground hard and slid several feet before stopping. Pain exploded through his chest. At least 2 ribs were cracked. Jake forced himself to breathe through the agony and stood up. The crowd roared with approval. This was what they had come to see. The human was outmatched, and everyone knew it. Blood ran from Jake's mouth. His vision blurred for a moment, but he did not call for a stop. He raised his hands and prepared to continue. Threx advanced slowly, enjoying the moment. He had broken lesser warriors with that first exchange. The human should be on the ground, finished. But the human stood waiting. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. For just a moment, Threx felt something unusual. Uncertainty. The fight continued. Threx attacked with overwhelming force. His fists crashed down like hammers. His feet struck like battering rams. Every blow that connected did terrible damage. Jake's left arm broke with a sound that echoed through the arena. His nose shattered. Blood covered his face, but Jake did not fall. He adjusted his fighting style to use only his right arm. He changed his stance to protect his broken ribs. He kept moving, kept dodging, kept fighting. Minutes turned into an hour. The crowd grew quieter as they watched something they had never seen before. In the observation deck, Vera watched with her hands clenched into fists. She knew what Jake was doing. He was wearing Threx down. The Kravik was stronger and tougher, but his species was built for short, brutal fights. Humans were different. Humans were built for endurance. On Earth, humans had hunted animals by chasing them for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Threx was beginning to tire. His breathing grew heavier. His movements became slightly slower. This had never happened to him before. He always ended fights quickly, but this human refused to die. No matter how much damage he took, no matter how hopeless the situation looked, he kept fighting. After 90 minutes, Jake saw his opening. Threx threw a punch that was just slightly too slow. Jake ducked under it and moved inside the Kravik's guard. For the first time in the match, Jake went on the offensive. He struck at vulnerable points with his one good hand. Behind the knee, under the arm, the throat. Threx staggered backward, shock on his reptilian face. How was the human still fighting? His body should have given up long ago. But humans did not give up. That was what made them dangerous. That was what the galaxy did not understand about Deathworlders. The two fighters circled each other. Both were damaged. Both were exhausted. But Jake's eyes remained focused and clear. Threx, for the first time in his career, felt something he had never felt in the arena. He felt fear. Not fear of death, but fear of something worse. Fear that he might lose. Threx gathered all his remaining strength. He would end this now one way or another. He charged at Jake with everything he had left, roaring his war cry. Jake did not dodge this time. Instead, he stepped forward to meet the charge. The two warriors collided in the center of the arena with a sound like thunder. When the dust cleared, both fighters were down. The arena fell completely silent. Even the referee seemed uncertain what to do. Medical teams stood ready at the edge of the floor, waiting for permission to enter. Everyone stared at the two motionless bodies. Then Jake moved. It was just a small movement at first, his right hand pushing against the ground. Slowly, impossibly, he began to rise. His broken body protested with every movement. His left arm hung useless at his side. Blood dripped from dozens of cuts. But he pushed himself up. Jake stood on shaking legs. He swayed but did not fall. The crowd remained silent, stunned by what they were witnessing. Threx lay on the ground, his massive chest rising and falling with labored breaths, but his eyes were closed. He was unconscious. The referee began the count. 1, 2, 3. The numbers echoed through the silent arena. Jake remained standing, his gray eyes fixed on his fallen opponent. 4, 5, 6. Threx did not move. 7, 8, 9. The crowd held their breath. 10. The referee declared the match over. Jake Morrison was the new champion. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the arena erupted. Aliens from dozens of species rose to their feet, cheering and shouting. They had witnessed something incredible. A human, from a species they had dismissed as weak, had defeated the strongest warrior in the galaxy. Vera ran onto the arena floor with the medical team. They caught Jake as his legs finally gave out. He smiled at her through the blood and pain before his eyes closed. The medical team quickly went to work, scanning his injuries and stabilizing him for transport to the hospital wing. On Earth, billions of humans watched the broadcast and celebrated. Their representative had won. Humanity had proven itself. The celebrations lasted for days. Parades filled the streets. Children wore Jake's name on their shirts. He became an instant hero, a symbol of what humans could achieve among the stars. In the hospital wing, Jake lay in a medical bed surrounded by advanced healing equipment. The doctors said he would recover fully in a few weeks. His broken bones would heal. His cuts would close. But he would carry the scars forever, physical scars and mental ones. Threx was in a bed nearby, also recovering. The Kravik warrior had awakened an hour after the match ended. He had asked to speak with Jake, but the doctor said both fighters needed rest first. There would be time for words later. For now, they both needed to heal. 2 days passed. Jake was sitting up in his bed, eating real food for the first time since the fight. Vera sat beside him, reading reports on a datapad. The galaxy was still talking about the match. Analysis and commentary filled every news channel. Some called it the greatest fight in tournament history. Then the alarm started. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridors. The calm atmosphere of the hospital wing shattered instantly. Doctors and nurses rushed to their stations. Security personnel ran past the door. Something was very wrong. Vera stood and went to the door, stopping a passing security officer. They spoke quickly, the officer's face grim. Vera's expression changed from confusion to shock to fear. She turned back to Jake, her face pale. "What is it?" Jake asked, already trying to get out of bed despite his injuries. "There is an emergency transmission going to all coalition worlds," Vera said quietly. A massive fleet has appeared at the edge of Coalition space. Origin unknown. They are not responding to any communications. They are simply advancing and destroying everything in their path. Jake felt his blood run cold. How many ships? Thousands, Vera replied. Maybe tens of thousands. The sensors cannot get an accurate count. But Jake, that is not the worst part. The Coalition Council has identified what they are from old historical records. She pulled up a holographic image on her datapad. It showed strange ships, dark and organic looking, like living things made of shadow. Jake had never seen anything like them. They did not match any known species design. They are called the Darkness, Vera continued. 10,000 years ago, they nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy. The Coalition of that era barely managed to drive them away. They retreated beyond the galactic rim and vanished. Everyone hoped they were gone forever. But they came back, Jake said quietly. Vera nodded. All tournament participants are being recalled to their homeworlds immediately. The Coalition is preparing for war. Every species is mobilizing their fleets. She paused, looking at Jake carefully. Earth must decide if we will fight alongside the Coalition or defend only our own system. Jake stared at the image of the dark ships. He had just won the greatest victory of his life. He had proven that humans belonged among the stars. But now all of that seemed meaningless. The galaxy faced extinction, and humanity, the youngest and weakest member of the Coalition, would have to choose between courage and survival. Outside the window, ships were already leaving the station. The tournament was over. The celebration was finished. A new battle was coming, one that would make his fight with Threx look like a training exercise. The darkness was coming, and nobody knew if the galaxy could survive. The Great Hall on Centris Prime had never been so crowded. Representatives from every Coalition species filled the chamber, their voices rising in argument and fear. Above them, holographic displays showed the advancing Darkness fleet. Red markers indicated destroyed colonies. The enemy was 3 weeks from the core systems. Ambassador Linda Price sat in the human delegation section, trying to follow the rapid arguments happening around her. She was 55 years old with gray hair and brown eyes that had seen many difficult negotiations. But nothing in her career had prepared her for this. The fear in the chamber was thick enough to taste. At the center of the chamber stood Soleth, one of the keepers. His species lived for thousands of years and served as the galaxy's historians. He was old even by keeper standards. His skin wrinkled and his movements slow, but his voice was strong as he spoke about the darkness. 10,000 years ago they came from beyond the rim, Soleth said. We do not know where they originated. We do not know why they attack. They do not want territory or resources. They want extinction. Every species they encountered was wiped out completely. Entire civilizations vanished as if they had never existed. The chamber fell silent as the old historian continued. The Coalition of that era fought with everything they had. Millions of ships, billions of warriors, whole species sacrificed themselves to buy time for others. In the end, we drove them back, but the cost was terrible. 20 species were lost. 100 worlds were left as dead rocks. And now they have returned, a Vortan counselor said, her voice shaking. But we are not ready. We have lived in peace for 10,000 years. Our fleets are for defense and exploration, not for war against an enemy like this. Debate erupted again. Some wanted to abandon the outer colonies and fortify only the core worlds. Others suggested scattering across the galaxy, hoping the darkness would not find them all. A few spoke of surrender, though nobody knew if the enemy even understood the concept. Fear made them argue in circles without reaching any decision. Linda listened carefully to every speaker. She had been Earth's voice in the Coalition for 3 years, working hard to earn respect for humanity. The other species still saw humans as newcomers, barely worth consideration in galactic affairs. But now she saw an opportunity. When there was a break in the arguments, she stood and requested permission to speak. Several alien representatives looked annoyed. What could humans possibly contribute to this discussion? They had only been in space for a few decades. They had no experience with galactic threats. But the council leader, a diplomatic Zenith elder, granted Linda permission to address the chamber. Linda walked to the speaking platform. She looked around at the frightened faces of species who had lived for centuries, who had built civilizations that spanned star systems. Then she began to speak in a calm, clear voice. Humanity is young to the stars, she said. We do not have your long history or your advanced technology. But we are not young to war. Earth's history is written in conflict. For thousands of years we fought ourselves. We know what it means to face extinction. We know what it takes to survive. She paused, letting her words sink in. When humans face an enemy that threatens their existence, they do not scatter. They do not hide. They stand together and fight. That is what we learned on our harsh world. That is what made us survivors. Earth will commit its entire fleet to the defense of Coalition space, Linda announced. It is not a large fleet compared to yours, but we will hold nothing back. We will fight alongside you, regardless of the cost. This is what it means to be part of the Coalition. This is what allies do. The chamber fell silent. Several representatives looked moved by the declaration. Humans could easily retreat to their home system and hope the darkness did not find them. But they were choosing to stand and fight for species they barely knew. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, perhaps both. After Linda's speech, the council moved to a smaller strategy chamber. Military leaders from each species gathered to plan the defense. Admiral Grant Palmer led the human delegation. He was 60 years old with gray hair and weathered brown skin. His eyes had the look of someone who had commanded in real combat, not just exercises. Commander Vera Hughes stood beside him, along with several other human officers. To everyone's surprise, Jake Morrison was also present. He was still recovering from the tournament, his left arm in a healing cast and his face showing fading bruises. But the Coalition leadership wanted him there as a symbol of human determination. Holographic displays filled the strategy chamber with data. The Darkness fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. Their technology was unknown but clearly advanced. They had destroyed 3 outer colonies in the past week, killing millions. They showed no interest in communication or negotiation. They simply advanced and destroyed. A Kravik admiral named Korvax dominated the discussion. He was a massive warrior with scars covering his scales. His voice boomed as he proposed an immediate counterattack. The Coalition should assemble every available ship and strike at the darkness before they advanced further. Many leaders nodded in agreement. They could not simply wait and let the enemy choose where to fight. Admiral Palmer raised his hand to speak. With respect, Admiral Korvax, we should gather more intelligence before committing to a major battle. We know nothing about their capabilities or weaknesses. Humans have a saying about fighting an unknown enemy. Never rush into battle blind. Korvax snorted with dismissal. Humans are cautious because you are weak. The Coalition has the most advanced technology in the galaxy. We have numbers and firepower on our side. We will crush these invaders as our ancestors did 10,000 years ago. Other species leaders agreed with Korvax. They had powerful fleets and advanced weapons. Surely they could defeat any enemy. Palmer's caution was dismissed as human inexperience. The decision was made quickly. The Coalition would assemble a massive strike force at the barrier system, a strategic location 3 days from the core worlds. Over the next 3 days, the largest military fleet in modern history gathered at the barrier system. Kravik battleships with armor thick enough to withstand nuclear weapons, Fortan carriers launching hundreds of fighter craft, Zenith destroyers with energy weapons that could slice through asteroids, ships from dozens of species all flying Coalition colors. The human fleet arrived as well. Their ships were smaller than most, built for speed and maneuverability rather than heavy armor. Earth's flag flew proudly beside the Coalition banner. Humans made up less than 1% of the total force, but they were there. They had committed everything they had. Jake stood on the bridge of the human flagship, the Valiant. Despite his injuries, he had insisted on being part of the battle. Admiral Palmer and Vera stood beside him, watching the massive fleet assemble through the view screen. It was an incredible sight. Thousands of ships representing every species in the Coalition, united against a common threat. But Jake felt uneasy. Something about this situation reminded him of his tournament matches. The Coalition was approaching this like a traditional battle, like something they understood. But the darkness was not a traditional enemy. The ancient records made that clear. They were something different, something the galaxy had barely survived before. "What are you thinking?" Vera asked quietly, noticing his expression. "I am thinking about Threx," Jake replied. "He was stronger than me in every way. By all logic, he should have won. But he underestimated me. He thought he knew what I was capable of based on appearances." "You think the Coalition is doing the same thing?" Vera asked. Jake nodded slowly. "They are confident because they have large fleets and advanced weapons. But confidence without understanding is dangerous. We know nothing about what we are really facing. Before Vera could respond, alarms sounded throughout the fleet. Sensors had detected the darkness approaching. The enemy fleet was massive, even larger than expected. Tens of thousands of dark ships moving in perfect formation. They did not slow or change course. They simply advanced like a tide of shadow. Admiral Korvax's voice came over the fleet communication channel. "All ships, battle formation. Prepare to engage on my command." His voice was confident, almost eager. He had waited his entire life for a battle like this. A chance to prove the strength of the coalition against a legendary enemy. The coalition fleet moved into attack formation. Thousands of ships arranging themselves with military precision. Weapons powered up. Shields activated at maximum strength. Fighter craft launched from carriers. Every species was ready to show the darkness what the modern coalition could do. Jake watched the approaching enemy through the view screen. The dark ships did not look like any vessels he had seen before. They seemed organic, like living things made of shadow and darkness. They pulsed with strange energy. Looking at them made his skin crawl. "All ships advance and fire at will," Korvax commanded. The coalition fleet surged forward. Thousands of energy weapons fired at once, lighting up the darkness of space. Missiles streaked toward the enemy. It was the greatest display of military power the galaxy had seen in thousands of years. For a moment, victory seemed certain. How could any enemy survive such overwhelming firepower? But then the darkness responded. And Jake's worst fears were confirmed. The coalition had walked into a trap. The coalition's weapons struck the dark ships and simply vanished. Energy beams that could melt through asteroid fields disappeared into the black hulls without effect. Missiles detonated against invisible barriers. Nothing worked. The advanced technology that the coalition was so proud of was completely useless. Then the darkness fired back. Black energy lanced out from their ships, energy that moved like living things. When it touched coalition vessels, it tore through shields and armor as if they were paper. Ships began to explode. Hundreds at first, then thousands. The carefully planned formation fell apart as captains desperately tried to evade the enemy fire. On the bridge of the Valiant, Admiral Palmer watched in horror as the fleet died around him. He had seen combat before, had commanded ships in dangerous situations, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The enemy was not just stronger. They were playing with the coalition like a cat plays with mice. "Evasive maneuvers," Palmer ordered calmly, though his hands gripped his chair hard enough to hurt. "All human ships scatter pattern Delta. Do not engage directly. Focus on survival." The human ships broke formation and scattered. Their smaller size and greater maneuverability gave them an advantage. They dodged and weaved through the battle, avoiding the worst of the enemy fire. Other coalition ships tried to follow their example, but most were too large and slow. They died in flames and debris. Jake stood beside Palmer, his face pale but his jaw set. He knew what was happening. The coalition had underestimated their enemy, just as Threx had underestimated Jake. But this time, the cost of that mistake was measured in thousands of lives. Ships exploded on every screen. The communication channels filled with desperate calls for help that nobody could answer. Admiral Korvax's voice came over the fleet channel, but the confidence was gone. "All ships, retreat. Fall back to Centris Prime, retreat now." The proud Kravik warrior sounded broken. His grand plan had failed completely. The mighty coalition fleet was running for its life. The surviving ships tried to escape, but the darkness pursued. Their dark vessels moved faster than anything the coalition had. They chased down fleeing ships and destroyed them one by one. The battle became a slaughter. Vera coordinated with the other human ships, trying to keep as many alive as possible. But there was only so much they could do. After 6 hours of running, the darkness finally stopped pursuing. They had made their point. The surviving coalition ships limped away into the darkness, carrying their wounded and their shame. Behind them, the barrier system was littered with debris. Thousands of ships destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of lives lost. The greatest military force in modern history had been broken in a single battle. 3 days later, the survivors reached Centris Prime. The human fleet had suffered the fewest losses because of their evasive tactics. But the victory felt hollow. They watched helplessly as their allies were destroyed. The Kravik flagship, the Pride of Kravos, had been torn apart. Admiral Korvax died at his post, still giving orders to his crew until the end. The mood on Centris Prime was one of despair. The council met again, but there was no debate this time. There was only fear and grief. Representatives from species who had lost their entire fleets sat in silence. Some openly discussed abandoning the coalition and fleeing to remote systems. Others talked of surrender, though nobody knew if the darkness would even listen. Jake attended the council meeting with Ambassador Price and Admiral Palmer. His injuries from the tournament were still visible, his arm still in its healing cast. But he barely noticed the pain anymore. He listened to the alien leaders talk about retreat and survival. He watched them give up hope. And something inside him grew angry. This was not the galaxy he had imagined when humans first reached for the stars. These were civilizations that had existed for thousands of years, species with incredible technology and vast knowledge, yet they were ready to surrender after a single defeat. They had forgotten what it meant to truly fight for survival. Jake stood and asked permission to speak. Many council members looked surprised. Some seemed annoyed. What could a human soldier possibly say that mattered now? But Ambassador Price supported his request, and the council leader allowed it. Jake walked to the center of the chamber, moving stiffly because of his injuries. "I want to tell you a story about Earth," Jake began. His voice was quiet but clear in the silent chamber. "About human history. We have faced extinction many times. We have fought enemies who seemed unbeatable. We have lost battles that should have ended our civilization." He looked around at the alien faces watching him, but we survived. Not because we were strong, not because we had superior technology. We survived because we never gave up. Even when defeat seemed certain, humans kept fighting. Because we understood something fundamental. The only true defeat is when you stop trying. Jake gestured to his healing injuries. "In the tournament, I fought Threx. He was stronger than me in every way, faster, tougher, more experienced. By all logic, I should have lost in the first minute. But I won. Do you know why?" Nobody answered. Jake continued. "I won because I understood something Threx did not. Winning is not always about being stronger than your enemy. Sometimes winning is simply about lasting longer, about refusing to quit no matter how much it hurts. That is what humans do. We endure." A Vortan counselor spoke up. "But the darkness is not like your tournament opponent. They have technology far beyond ours. Our weapons are useless against them. What good is endurance when we cannot even hurt them?" "You are right," Jake agreed. "Direct confrontation will not work, so we must change our approach." The coalition fought the darkness using traditional tactics. Large fleets, direct battles, overwhelming force. It failed. We need to try something different. Admiral Palmer stood to support Jake. "Humanity has experience with this kind of warfare. When faced with a superior enemy, we learned to fight differently. Guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, wars of attrition. We make the enemy pay for every inch of ground. We wear them down over time. You want us to hide and strike from shadows?" a Kravik counselor demanded. "That is not honorable warfare. That is cowardice." Jake looked at the Kravik directly. "Is it more honorable to die in glorious battle and let your species go extinct? Or is it more honorable to do whatever is necessary to survive? Your ancestors fought the darkness 10,000 years ago. They won, but barely. Perhaps they did not fight with honor either. Perhaps they did what was necessary." The chamber fell silent as the truth of Jake's words sank in. The coalition had survived the first war with the darkness, but at a terrible cost. The old records did not speak much of glory or honor. They spoke of desperation and sacrifice. They spoke of doing whatever it took to survive. Ambassador Price stood beside Jake. "Humanity offers to lead the coalition's defense. Admiral Palmer will coordinate all military forces. We will use human tactics and human strategy. We cannot promise victory, but we can promise that we will not give up. We will fight until the end, whatever that end may be." The proposal was outrageous. Humans were the youngest species in the coalition, with the smallest fleet and the least experience, yet they were asking to command all coalition forces. Several representatives immediately protested, but others remained quiet, thinking. They had tried their way and failed. Perhaps it was time to try something different. The debate lasted for hours. Arguments for and against flew back and forth. Finally, the council leader called for a vote. The chamber fell silent as each representative cast their decision. The vote was close, but when the final count was announced, the result was clear. By a narrow margin, the coalition had agreed. Humanity would lead the defense. Admiral Palmer was given full authority over all remaining coalition forces. The fate of the galaxy now rested in the hands of a species that had been among the stars for less than a decade. It was either the Coalition's last hope or their final mistake. After the council session ended, Jake stood on the observation deck of Centris Prime. Stars filled the darkness beyond the window, beautiful and cold. Somewhere out there, the darkness was advancing. Somewhere out there, millions would die in the coming battles, and humanity had just accepted responsibility for trying to stop it. Vera joined him at the window. "Do you really think we can win?" she asked quietly. Jake was silent for a moment. "I think we can survive long enough to figure out what the darkness really wants. And maybe if we are lucky and smart, we can find a way to make them leave. But it will cost us. It will cost us dearly." "Then we better get to work," Vera said. "Admiral Palmer is waiting. He wants to start planning the new defense strategy immediately." Jake nodded and turned away from the window. The Coalition had lost a battle, but the war was not over. Not yet. Humans had learned long ago that survival was not about never falling down. It was about getting back up, no matter how many times you were knocked down. The galaxy was about to learn that lesson, whether they wanted to or not. Admiral Palmer worked 18-hour days, reorganizing the Coalition defenses from the ground up. He abandoned every traditional tactic that had failed at Barrier System. Instead, he implemented strategies from Earth's bloodiest wars, the kind of warfare where winning meant surviving, not glory. The remaining Coalition fleets were divided into small, fast groups. No more massive formations, no more direct confrontations. Instead, they would strike at the darkness supply lines and retreat before the enemy could respond. Hit and run, guerrilla warfare, wars of attrition, the kind of fighting that humans had perfected over thousands of years of conflict. Jake was given command of a special operations unit. His team included both human and alien soldiers, chosen for their adaptability and willingness to learn. Vera served as his second in command. Together, they trained their people in tactics that seemed strange to the other species, but were second nature to humans. Their mission was dangerous. They would raid behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and disrupting darkness operations. It was not the kind of warfare taught in military academies. It was dirty, difficult, and deadly, but it was effective. Months passed. The darkness continued to advance, but their progress slowed dramatically. Every system they tried to take was fought for. Every colony they destroyed cost them time and resources. The Coalition forces, under human leadership, refused to give them easy victories. The invaders began to show signs of frustration. Jake's team conducted dozens of raids. They destroyed supply depots. They sabotaged communications. They rescued civilians from occupied worlds. The work was exhausting and dangerous. Jake lost team members with every mission, but slowly, painfully, they began to gather intelligence about their enemy. The darkness was not a single unified force, they discovered. It was a collective intelligence, thousands of ships working as one mind through constant communication. That unity made them powerful, but it was also a weakness. Disrupt their communications and they became confused. Target their command ships and entire formations lost coordination. During a raid on an occupied station, Jake's team found something unexpected. Ancient records, left behind by a civilization that had existed millions of years ago. The records spoke of the darkness, but they called it by another name. They called it the Reaper. Jake spent hours reading the translated records. What he learned made his blood run cold. The Reaper was not an invading force trying to conquer the galaxy. It was something far worse. It was a test. Every civilization, when it reached a certain level of development, attracted the attention of the Reaper. The Reaper came to judge whether that civilization deserved to survive. The ancient civilization that left the records had survived the Reaper's test, but barely. They discovered the truth too late to save most of their species. According to their records, the Reaper judged civilizations based on their will to survive. Not their technology, not their military power, their determination to endure despite overwhelming odds. Jake realized the terrible truth. The massacre at Barrier System was not the Reaper fighting at full strength. It was the Reaper testing the Coalition, seeing if they had the will to continue. When most species immediately talked about retreat and surrender, they had failed the initial test. The Reaper expected them to scatter and die, but then humanity had stepped in. Humans who refused to give up. Humans who fought with determination even when victory seemed impossible. That was what the Reaper wanted to see. That was what might save the galaxy. Jake brought the ancient records to Admiral Palmer immediately. Palmer read them carefully, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finished, he looked at Jake with grim understanding. They both knew what this meant. The Coalition had to prove themselves worthy, or the Reaper would destroy them all. Palmer called for an emergency council meeting. Jake presented the ancient records and explained what they had learned. The Reaper was testing them. If they continued to show the will to fight, if they refused to surrender despite the odds, the Reaper would eventually withdraw. But if they broke, if they scattered and abandoned each other, the Reaper would destroy them. The council members sat in stunned silence. They had been judged and found wanting. But Ambassador Price spoke up. It was not too late, she argued. They could still prove themselves. Humanity had shown them how. Now the other species must follow that example. They must show the Reaper that this galaxy deserved to survive. The decision was made. The Coalition would make one final stand. They would gather what remained of their forces and face the Reaper directly at Centris Prime. Not to win through superior firepower, but to prove they would not surrender. They would show the Reaper that this civilization, this galaxy, had the will to survive. The Reaper fleet arrived at Centris Prime 1 week later. Tens of thousands of dark ships surrounded the capital world. Every remaining Coalition vessel formed a defensive line around the planet. Humans, Kravik, Vortan, Zenith, and dozens of other species stood together. They knew they would take heavy losses. But they refused to run. The battle was fierce. The Reaper attacked with overwhelming force, testing the Coalition's resolve. Ships died by the hundreds, then thousands. But the Coalition held. They fought with determination they did not know they possessed. Human tactics combined with alien technology and courage from every species created a defense that surprised even the Reaper. Jake fought on the front lines, leading his team in desperate boarding actions against Reaper ships. They discovered that the dark vessels could be damaged from inside, where their defenses were weaker. It was suicide work, but volunteers from every species joined the boarding teams. They fought together, bled together, and died together. The battle lasted 3 days. The Coalition fleet was reduced to a fraction of its original size. Centris Prime's surface was scarred by impacts from debris. Millions had died, but they did not break. Every species fought with everything they had. They proved that they would not surrender no matter the cost. On the 3rd day, something unprecedented happened. The Reaper fleet stopped attacking. For the first time since they appeared, they paused. The dark ships pulled back from Centris Prime, gathering at the edge of the system. The Coalition forces held their positions, exhausted but ready to continue if needed. A single Reaper vessel remained. It sent a communication, the first message the Coalition had received from the enemy. The language was ancient, older than any current civilization. But the Keepers could translate it. The message was simple and final. The test was complete. This civilization had proven worthy. The Reaper acknowledged their will to survive. Then the Reaper fleet vanished. They did not retreat slowly. They simply disappeared as if they had never existed. The galaxy was left in silence. The Coalition forces stared at empty space where the enemy had been moments before. Slowly the realization spread. They had survived. The test was over. They had passed. Weeks later, Jake stood in the rebuilt council chamber on Centris Prime. The Coalition was honoring the survivors and remembering the fallen. Every species had lost people they loved. Every world had scars that would take years to heal. But they had survived together. Ambassador Price gave a speech about the future. The Coalition was changed by this experience, she said. They had learned that true strength came not from technology or military power, but from the will to endure. It was a lesson humans had learned on their harsh world over millions of years. Now the entire galaxy understood. Jake thought about the irony of it all. During the tournament, the aliens had called him the Reaper, a name meant to honor his ability to defeat seemingly unbeatable opponents. They did not know they were naming him after the very thing that would test them all. The name had been more appropriate than anyone realized. After the ceremony, Jake stood with Vera and Admiral Palmer on an observation deck, looking at the stars. The Reaper was gone, but the lesson remained. The galaxy had learned what humans had always known. Survival was not about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about refusing to quit, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. What will you do now? Vera asked Jake. You are a hero across the galaxy. You could do anything you want, Jake smiled slightly. I think I will go back to work. There is still a lot to do. The coalition needs to rebuild. Species need to learn to trust each other again. And someone needs to train the next generation in case the Reaper ever comes back. Do you think they will come back? Palmer asked. Maybe, Jake replied. In another 10,000 years. Or maybe never. The ancient records suggest that civilizations who pass the test are left alone. But it does not matter. Whether they come back or not, the galaxy is better prepared now. We know what real strength is. We know what it takes to survive. The coalition had cheered their victory over the darkness. The celebrations had lasted for weeks. But when the Reaper lifted its mask, they discovered the truth. The real test was never about defeating an enemy. It was about proving they deserved to survive. And thanks to humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender, the galaxy had passed that test. Earth had taken its place among the stars. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. They had seen what Deathworlders could do when faced with extinction. They fought. They endured. They survived. And they taught the rest of the galaxy to do the same.